Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back, listeners. Today we're going to focus on mining here in Wyoming, energy policy and mining policy around innovation and how it's playing into the need for more minerals. Wyoming has so many important mined materials from coal and trona to rare earths and critical minerals and uranium. We're going to try to talk about it all. So with me today is a special guest, Travis Deti, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. So Travis, thank you so much for joining us here.
It's a pleasure. I'm honored to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
So let's just to start, talk a little bit about your background and what led you to your current role.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up here in Laramie. It's good to be home. I graduated from the University of Wyoming. It took me 10 years to do it, and I'm not a doctor. But I'm very proud of my degree from the University of Wyoming. And once I graduated, I went to work for Senator Craig Thomas out in Washington, D.C. for a while, and then I came back and continued to work with Senator Thomas until he passed away, worked with John Barrasso when he came in. And then, one thing led to another, and I joined the Mining Association in 2011. And I've been the executive director for the last 9 years, and it really is a great organization. Our organization represents the state's coal companies, our trona companies, uranium, bentonite. We represent the companies that are exploring for rare earths and trying to develop that industry in the United States. We also have companies doing gold exploration and mining and lithium. And, as you said, there's a lot going on right now. And I think it's a great field to be in, especially in Wyoming. It's a very important industry for Wyoming. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we're here as a state.
Right.
You look at our state flag, you have the farmer representing our agriculture industry, and then you have the miner. And, going back, a couple of centuries when Delegate Joseph Carey was advocating for statehood for Wyoming in Washington, D.C., one of his key arguments was Wyoming's vast mineral resources. So it really is why we're here as a state, those vast resources. They pay a lot of the bills for the state of Wyoming, keep the tax burden low on our citizens. And, it ebbs and flows. And, when the association was founded back in the 1950s, our big mineral at that time was uranium. Mm-hmm. And, you fast forward and, to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you see coal take over. And coal is not where it was a decade and a half ago, but we're seeing the resurgence of these other sectors again. Our uranium sector, our trona and natural soda ash is a glittering gem in our mining crown, and all these new sectors coming online. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of new folks coming in looking to develop our mineral resources, largely because we have a very favorable regulatory environment. We have a favorable presidential administration right now, and it's really an exciting time to be in the industry in Wyoming.
So Travis, what did you study here at the University of Wyoming?
I studied political science.
That makes sense.
And it comes in handy in this job sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's such a great opportunity for UW students. There are opportunities to go do internships with the federal delegation. We have an SER student right now that has an internship at the governor's office. So I think we can offer a lot of opportunities for students that are interested in. You can study political science, or you can study energy or really anything and get those internships. It's a great opportunity. So, okay, back to your world. So for anyone not familiar, what specifically is the role and the objectives of the Wyoming Mining Association?
Yeah, so we are the state's advocate for our mining industry and our companies that are developing our resources. We do a lot of outreach, public education. Of course, we work very closely with the state legislature on policy matters and statutory matters. We have a very close working relationship with our state regulators at the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. As you know, the regulated community and the regulating community, they have to have a good, close working relationship if you're going to get your resource out of the ground and turn it into tax revenue, turn it into jobs. So we work very closely with those folks over in Cheyenne. We also work with our federal delegation on issues at the federal level, and to a lesser extent, working with our federal agencies that oversee the industry, the Bureau of Land Management, the Environmental Protection Agency, and those doors have been kind of closed, recently. And with the change of administration, we're happy to say that it's opened up again. We're starting to get our phone calls returned and and develop the relationship that we need. Because again, between the regulator and the regulated community, it doesn't have to be adversarial. We can work together in a partnership to solve problems. And in the end, it's about getting the resource out of the ground responsibly, and generating that tax revenue for the state of Wyoming and creating jobs for Wyoming families.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head in terms of Wyoming's advantage. Obviously, you have the minerals, but a lot of places have minerals. But the fact that at all levels of government and here in academia, we're kind of rowing in the same direction. And so we're recording this the week you have your annual conference. And thank you for inviting me to speak at that. And one of the things I'm going to say, spoiler alert, except this will air after the conference, is that I think you would be hard pressed to find a mining sector and a academic unit or academia in general that had a more close working relationship. So it's really like across the state we're working together to mine and do it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with an institution like the University of Wyoming right in our backyard. And it's our only state-wide university, four-year institution. Developing those relationships are critical, and we've worked very hard at the Mining Association to do that, not only with your School of Energy Resources, Dr. Krutka, but the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Mm-hmm. We work very closely with the College of Education, because what it comes down to is, we, as you said, we all want to row in the same direction, and whether it's your shop here or our mining operations are committed to your school here. They've put their money where their mouth is on the table to get you the resources so that you can develop carbon capture technology, for example. Our Trona operators financially support the College of Engineering with their control management program over there, their systems management program. And then at the College of Education, working closely on workforce development and career and technical education and training for those teachers that are going to go out and train the next generation of skilled workers that we need to work in our mines and again to develop the resource. That's critical. Workforce is absolutely critical. You have to have a skilled and trained workforce. You have to have people doing the research and developing those technologies that are going to keep our resources viable in the future. And that's more important now than it ever has been. I think, with the debates surrounding coal and energy production in this country, technology is going to be key if we're going to continue to use our coal like we have in the past and power our country. And that work's got to be done here. Right. It's not going to be done anywhere else. And so that relationship between the industry and academia and the research component is absolutely critical if we're going to keep moving forward. And again, it's about revenue and it's about jobs.
Mm-hmm. And so, Travis, Trona is a big part of the state's economy, especially in the southwest part of the state. Sometimes in some circles, not here, obviously, but some places it can fly under the radar in terms of how it's used, what it is, and how important it is to Wyoming and really the world. So talk about Trona, how it's used and its role in Wyoming, and how Wyoming's role in Trona production really undermines global supply.
Yep, absolutely. So we have a very, very unique resource in the state of Wyoming with our Trona resource. And it's like nothing else anywhere in the world. It's mined underground, and then the Trona is brought up to the surface where it's processed into natural soda ash. And natural soda ash is a product that's used in many things that we use in everyday life, not only in the United States, but around the world. Our soda ash is our top international export from the state of Wyoming. It goes all over the world, and it's used primarily in glass. You look out your windows anywhere in the United States, you're looking through Wyoming Trona. If you're driving an automobile manufactured in the United States or even overseas, that soda ash goes into that automotive glass so you can see out your windows. It's used in detergent. It's used in chemical manufacturing. So it's a very versatile product, and again, very unique to Wyoming. We compete heavily in the international market with synthetic soda ash made by a chemical process, which is a lot less environmentally friendly than the way that we produce it here in Wyoming. But that industry has been, it's been solid in Wyoming since the 1950s, and great jobs. They're generational jobs. You have people working in the Trona Patch in the Rock Springs, Green River area that have been doing that job for 35 years, and they've got family members in the mine. And that's actually one of the problems that we're kind of facing right now, is we're seeing retirements right now and replacing those workers with younger people. So that's again why it's critical to do that education component and that training component so that we can get the workers that we need to fill those jobs going forward. It's a little bit tough right now in the industry. The president's tariffs are taking a little bite out of the industry, making it a little bit tougher to do some business. We're hopeful that some of those waves will get evened out soon, but it's a very solid industry, and it's been very steady for the state of Wyoming. The industry employs probably about 2,500 people, good paying jobs, very good paying jobs, six-figure paying jobs, and you add about another 500 contractors in that, so it's a very solid industry for that part of the state, and it's expanding. We're going to be seeing 2 new mines open up here in the next 10 years, and that's really good news for Wyoming. And there's a lot going on, and it's good news.
Great. And the Trona industry and the production in our reserves are in a part of the state that has a lot of federal nexus, and really across the state, a lot of Wyoming's minerals and energy are federal. Either the lands or the minerals are federal minerals. So can you talk about what that means and how it impacts our extractive industry here in Wyoming?
Absolutely. So our Trona resource and most of our coal resource are owned by the federal government. So we have to lease that in order to develop it. It can be tricky sometimes, especially on the coal side. Right now we're still operating under a ban of leasing new coal leases in the Powder River Basin. We're hoping that goes away soon with some of the actions of the new administration. But you also have to lease your Trona resource as well. And what that means for Wyoming is that there is a federal component right there, but you also get federal royalties from what you mine, and we get about half of what we pay in federal royalties to the federal government comes back to the state. But you also, not only with our leased minerals, a lot of the mining activity takes place on federal land, and that falls under the Bureau of Land Management too. So we have to go through, the various regulatory steps, whether it be the NEPA process or the leasing process, and that nexus blends right into U.S. Forest Service land in the northeast part of the state, and so we have to deal with archaeology and that sort of thing as well. So there's a lot of hurdles that you have to overcome in order to produce a mineral. And, could it be streamlined? Absolutely. But it's just some of the hoops that you have to jump through. A lot of our operations work on a checkerboard where the resource might be federally owned underneath, but then you're in a checkerboard situation on the surface where you have to deal with private landowners, with the state of Wyoming, and with the federal government. So it's really complicated, and we've got a lot of great people that do this stuff every day to navigate that web of regulation and what you need to do to actually get to the resource. So it's complicated, but we do it every day, and it just is what it is. And we're always looking for help, streamlining the process, whether it be at the state level, at the federal level, and it's just it's an ongoing process. But getting back to what I said earlier, that's where those relationships are so important with between the regulated and the regulated community and the regulator. Right. Is to be able to sit down at the table and identify problems and work through them, because the ultimate goal is getting the resource out of the ground responsibly.
I think that's a really good point. I think in Wyoming, anytime the state has an opportunity to get primacy for something, meaning essentially a state entity, often the Department of Environmental Quality can lead the permitting effort, the state will go after that. And it's not that the approval process is any less rigorous. It's just that we can choose how many jobs, for example, to fund in that area, and what a priority is for the state might be different than a federal priority. And
yeah, absolutely, and we've had primacy over our coal program for decades, and the primary regulatory authority is on the ground at the Wyoming DEQ. They're the ones that go out and do the site visits. They're the one that manage the permits. Within the last 5 or 6 years, I can't remember, I'm starting to get old, but we became an agreement state with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and now we have primacy over our uranium recovery program. And that has proven just to be a fantastic move for the state of Wyoming and for industry. Under the old system, you had the state regulating, you had the federal government regulating, and you basically had a dual program of regulation. Cost the uranium operator in Wyoming a lot of money. And when we took over primacy under the agreement state program a few years ago, saved the operators about half of what they were paying before. And that's huge because it's a very capital intensive operation to run a uranium recovery mine. And, that was just a tremendous boon right now. And, given the situation that we're in right now today with the new focus on nuclear energy and redeveloping our nuclear capabilities in the United States, some of the president's executive orders, and that coupled with what the state did a few years ago in the agreement state program, it's really set the stage for a nice little uranium boom here in the state of Wyoming, which we're right on the edge of.
Yeah, we publish our crew report led by the Center for Energy Regulation Policy Analysis. And if you go to that, it's published monthly, led by Dawson Klusner in that center. And what you see is that the uranium production in the state is already ramping up. So
yeah, absolutely. And we were in a really down period a few years back where the prices were depressed artificially from foreign competitors. And given some of the, unfortunately, one of the triggers towards boosting those prices up and increasing Wyoming's competitiveness in the field was the Russian invasion of Ukraine and some of the things that have transpired subsequently, like the ban on Russian uranium. And, those have really gone a long way to bring those prices up to where they need to be so that it's economical to develop the resource in Wyoming again. And we're really in the catbird seat in the United States. I mean, 'cause we got uranium, in many spots in the country, but Wyoming is really positioned well. We went through that period when production was so down, it was really negligible, but we kept operations running and on the ground that when, the prices turned around and some of these other things fell into place, really positioned well to start ramping that production up again. And that's what you're seeing right now. We have 2 operations up and running again, producing good amounts of uranium, looking to expand that. We've got another 2 that'll probably be in production within the next 18 months. And there's a lot of exploration activity going on, a lot of new companies dipping their toe in the pool, if you will. And, I was quoted in a publication last week, it's hard to keep up with it from the trade association perspective. We're trying to identify new members to bring into the Mining Association, and there are a lot out there, and they just keep popping up. And when I get done with my convention this week, that's probably what I'm going to turn my attention to, is to identify these folks and shake them down and get them to join the association.
All right. Yes. And that echoes what our state geologist, Director Campbell, I've heard her say before, is our uranium production areas were the last kind of to ramp down and therefore are the best situated to ramp up. So let's go shake them down. And
Absolutely. And Dr. Campbell does a fantastic job with her team over at the Geological Survey. And in the last few years, some of the work that they've done as far as, identifying new resource, the areas where we can find new stuff, some of the work they've done over there is just phenomenal. And it's make it a one-stop shop to where an operator can come in and the work's already done. They know where the mineral is and they don't have to go through all that. And it saves them time, saves them money, and, they can get their boots on the ground and start developing.
Yeah. Great geologic survey we have here. And right across what you may or may not call a parking lot right here next to us here at SER. So is there anything else on the policy or regulatory issues facing the mining sector that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think we're watching very optimistically what's going on in Washington, D.C. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that energy policy and natural resource policy, we've taken probably a 180-degree turn from the previous administration, and the emphasis now on, looking to ease some of the regulatory burden, to streamline some things, and to actually develop our resources domestically instead of reliance, and I'm not talking about our coal resources or anything that we've got, but some of these other things like in the area of critical minerals and rare earths on things that we haven't even been on the playing field on for decades, to try to get those out of the ground and make it easier for a producer to do that. I think there's a lot of optimism and a lot of excitement out there, frankly, and we're kind of watching to see how things unfold with some legislation coming out of Washington, D.C. to kind of, cut through some of that federal red tape and give some relief to our producers that are already producing. On the coal side, I think we're looking at some royalty reductions in the federal royalty, which will go a long way towards making our coal resource viable in the future. The renewed focus on nuclear and developing a nuclear fuel chain in the United States, which doesn't really exist right now. Those are really big things coming out of Washington, D.C. And, at the state level, we've always had great support, from the Wyoming legislature, from the governor's office in doing what we need to do because they understand the importance of the industry of the state of Wyoming. When you're contributing, upwards of $800 million a year to state coffers, local governments, our folks understand the importance of the industry, so we get great support there. And we're always kind of looking at, little things where we can make things better, whether it be on the local, the state regulatory front or the tax front. The legislature gave the coal industry a little tax relief last session, and very appreciative of that. So we're always looking at those things to try to make it easier and more efficient to responsibly develop the mineral.
Great. So let's talk about innovation. I see Wyoming is a great innovator in areas important to your industry. So where do you see innovation and technology in helping to sustain Wyoming's mining future and mining industry long into the future?
Well, I think it's critical. And, we kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but, the big thing at the forefront right now is carbon capture technology. And, that is it is absolutely critical in order to keep using our coal resource into the future. And that's for a couple of reasons, because a lot of our, we can mine all the coal that we want in Wyoming. I mean, and we've got a resource that can that will last 500 years into the future for
I think we're at 1,000 at current mining rates.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot. Yeah. I think the total resource in the Powder River Basin in Wyoming is over 1 trillion tons of coal. And, so we've got the resource and we can develop the resource, but the catch comes is you have to have a customer for that resource. And the customer for our coal resource is the utility. And those utilities are out of state. We burn about, 20 million tons of coal in Wyoming, but we ship about, roughly 190 million tons to other states. So those are our customers. And then you have their customers, which is the ratepayer, Joe Sixpack and Sally Housecoat that want to go home and turn their lights on. They're the ultimate customer. And what you have in some states is many states that we ship our coal to are not like Wyoming, that aren't all raw coal. And you have, the bottom line is there is a demand out there for lower emission energy. Mm-hmm. And we've got to acknowledge that. We're not going to go back to the 2000s where we're mining 450 million tons of coal a year because people aren't worried about emissions. They are worried about emissions right now. And specifically, they're worried about carbon dioxide. And whether you believe that carbon dioxide is a catastrophic threat and global climate change is coming to it doesn't matter. What matters is our customers believe that, and we have to acknowledge that. So we have to solve the carbon capture problem, and that's going to be critical. And I think in this environment we're in today, where you're seeing the Trump administration come out saying, well, we're not going to do the greenhouse gas restrictions anymore. We're not going to do that. And that's fine. That's good news. But the pendulum swings. And, I'm not as optimistic that we may be in this spot, 5 years down the line. We could be right back where we were, 8 months ago as far as federal policy goes. So it's critical that we have that we solve the carbon capture nut and make it economically viable for a utility to either retrofit an existing plant or build that new generation of coal-fired power plants with a carbon capture component to them. We've got to solve that problem, and you're doing that right here at the University of Wyoming. That's what you're here to do, is to do the research and innovate and crack the technological nuts that we need to do to solve the problem. And there's a track record there. There's a track record. One of the slides that I have when I give a presentation, it shows a little graph with the implementation of the Clean Air Act back in 1974, and you see actual criteria pollutants from coal-fired power plants steadily decline, almost 95%.
Yeah.
And coal use skyrockets. And that was done through technology and innovation. So the track record is there, and there's no reason we can't continue that with carbon dioxide.
Sure.
It just needs time, and it needs time. It takes a little money. It takes some resources, and it takes people working on the problem to get it done. And like I say, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, and I think that's a problem that can be solved, because it will have to be solved.
I think we're closer than we've ever been. I think, my other concern about longevity and, our role here at the School of Energy Resources and supporting all the state's mining and energy sector, including the coal sector, is, we're going to see some increased operating timelines. We're going to see retirements of coal-fired power plants outside the state pushed out because of increased demand across the nation for AI and data centers. However, plants are older. And if you want to support the industry, we have to build new ones. And regardless of, there's no one who would think that there's no risk for any future regulation associated with greenhouse gases. And there will be no new power plants anywhere unless we have some solution. They may or may not have that solution initially integrated. So I think we keep our foot on the gas and try to drive down the cost and drive up our understanding of these technologies and the subsurface, which is what we're doing here, so that we're ready and we can present solutions for our customers outside the state.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. What we've got right now is a window of time, and I think you hit on something really key, is we're going to be seeing some of these coal-fired power plants that were scheduled for retirement get those dates bumped out a little bit. That's time, and that's time to be working on the problem. And the other component is we don't just have to concentrate on coal, because as you mentioned, with the projected demand for energy in this country, whether it be from artificial intelligence, data centers, electric vehicles, we're going to have to power that from somewhere.
Sure.
And it's not going to be done with wind and solar.
Right.
It's really going to be, and now I'm going to editorialize a little bit here. We don't need an all of the above strategy. We need an all that works strategy. We know that coal works. We know that gas works. We know that nuclear works. And in Wyoming, I get some of this pushback from legislators and other folks that, well, if we throw our hat in with this nuclear stuff, we're going to take away from our coal industry. Well, that's not true. It is flat out not true. You need them both.
Yeah.
And, we have a real opportunity right now in the United States, not just in Wyoming, in the United States, to bolster our coal fleet, to start looking at that next generation of coal plants, and to build up that new nuclear cycle that we haven't had forever. To build the new small modular reactors, to build the new advanced reactors, and to fuel them with Wyoming uranium. And, there's another component there that, uranium just doesn't go into a nuclear power plant. You have to convert it. You have to enrich it. There's an opportunity in Wyoming to pursue some of that technology, too, and build up a nuclear fuel cycle that we don't have in this country right now. We have to send our uranium to Canada to get it enriched and converted. We have to send it relying on Russia for nuclear fuel right now, and we will until we develop those resources in the United States. We still have to rely on Russia for our nuclear fuel for our existing nuclear fleet. So we have the opportunities to do that here in Wyoming, and what it's going to take innovation. It's going to take research and development. It's going to take a will from the people of Wyoming to say, hey, we need to go down this road. This is because, again, extraction is revenue, extraction is jobs, and if we're going to continue to live the way we live in Wyoming, where the extraction industry pays the bills for us and keeps our tax burden low, we've got to get that stuff out of the ground, and we've got to have a place to send it. We've got to have customers, whether it's a coal-fired power plant and a utility that wants to burn coal with carbon capture technology, or whether it's a small modular reactor that wants to use Wyoming uranium for its fuel. So we've got a lot of opportunity right now, and it's really kind of an exciting time, but we have to, you have to accept a couple of things, that you need to put your resources into research and development, into innovation, and then you have to have the will to say, hey, let's do this stuff.
Exactly. And again, to your point, your members are definitely supporting us here across the university in these areas. And for anyone who might wonder, well, okay, why would we work on these things in Wyoming? But this is where we have control, right? Like, we understand our geology. Great work at the survey, great work here at SCR and across the university. We have the DEQ, like back to the original point, where we have the ability to invest in permitting, to have a receptive legislature that makes laws and rules that are receptive to mining and novel energy technologies. We have control here, and we can demonstrate these technologies, CCUS, but also, things related to nuclear. We have the Wyoming's first nuclear power plant is an advanced reactor. Like, how cool is that? And there's a reason it was cited here. And so it's a great place to innovate. And when we do that innovation, it's not only for that site, it's for the future of where our energy gets used anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we go back to shuttering our coal fleet, and whatever you replace it with, if you shutter the coal fleet in the United States, what state has the most to lose from that?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's the state of Wyoming.
We do. Yeah.
We have the most to lose from it. Who is going to be developing that carbon capture technology? Is Texas going to do it? No, they don't, because they don't mine the coal there.
Yeah.
We mine 40% of the nation's coal out of the state of Wyoming. We have absolutely the most to lose if we decide to steer away and not use coal-fired power in this country. So we've got to be the ones that are solving the problem here, and that's what you're doing at the University of Wyoming. We've got to be the ones to take the bull by the horns and solve the problems here, and even on a global scale, if carbon dioxide, again, if it's really the existential threat we've been led to believe in some corners, the Chinese aren't going to solve the problem. They don't care.
Yeah.
The Indians don't care. They're not going to solve the problem. The problem's got to be solved in the United States, and it's going to be solved in Wyoming. I mean that's how big of a deal this really is, and how important it is.
And we've already made great strides, so we'll just keep working on that. And should mention the ITC, Integrated Test Center, where we're testing new technologies, all the carbon storage projects, the fact that we have an enhanced oil recovery industry operating, and we have the Institute, we just have so much going for us. But and I know that both of us could talk about this all day, especially me, but to run all this, we have to have workforce. Right? And we're working on that really hard here at SCR, and it is not just our program, but working across the university. But what do you see as the opportunities and challenges for the sector, the mining sector, addressing workforce development, ensuring that we have folks ready for the next generation?
Well, workforce is huge, and it's a huge issue for the state of Wyoming just in general. I mean, we're not in any different boat than the oil and gas industry or the construction industry or a lot of other things. Workforce is just a real tough problem right now, and it's. I'll be careful when I say this, but it's not a bad problem to have, because it means you've got jobs and it means you have activity. But you've got to solve that problem of, you're going to have to bring folks to the state of Wyoming. You're going to have to bring a workforce. You're going to have to educate a workforce. And, you're going to have to train those folks to do those jobs. And, it's the vocations and it's the trades. Career and technical education is huge for my organization and for my industry. So we're working very closely with the community colleges, with the College of Education at the University of Wyoming. And, Dr. Shim has been a tremendous partner on some of this stuff, to try to put the programs in place. You can't give a kid an education in high school in the trades, whether it be welding, whether it be an electrician or plumbing or pipe fitting, if you don't have the teachers that are going to teach them that. And that's done here at the University of Wyoming with the, training that next generation of industrial arts teachers, to train these young people and not only to train them to do, to give them the skills to do the job, but to educate them that there are jobs out there and they're good paying jobs. And, you can, if you go down the right career path, not everybody's cut out for college.
Yeah.
The trades are critically important in the state of Wyoming. And so we have to do, and I think we do a pretty good job of trying to get that message out, but we have to do a better job because, as I mentioned, the trona industry in Wyoming is a great example of this, where you've had folks that have been working those jobs for 40 years, they're retiring. We've got to replace them. And, it's tough. It's a tough problem to have. The housing issue plays into that as well. As,
Sure.
if you're going to be doing these expansion projects and you're going to be building a new power plant in Kemmerer, you've got to get a workforce. You've got to house your workforce. You've got to have the infrastructure in place in your communities to be able to support that. So we've got a lot of issues facing us, some significant problems, but they're not necessarily bad problems to have. It means that the resource is in demand, and we've just got to figure out a way to get it out of the ground and do what we need to do.
So we're all really well said. And obviously we have a lot of work to do on innovation, on workforce. There's a lot to be done. I'm glad that we have the level of collaboration we do. So tell me, what are your hopes or expectations in terms of what Wyoming's mining industry looks like over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, if there's one thing that Wyoming's mining industry is that it is very resilient. Yeah. I think, if you look forward, and I don't like to make predictions, especially about the future, but, I think we've got, in the short-term window of the next 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years, I'm very optimistic going forward, but, being optimistic doesn't mean that you can't be realistic at the same time and recognize that things can change very, very quickly. Sure. And all it takes a change at the federal administration and a reversal of the regulatory trajectory that we're currently on right now. I mean, it could be very tough. But again, the industry is very resilient. We've been through ups, we've been through downs, and the bottom line, when you look at it, at the very end of the day, is that the nation and the world need what's in the ground in Wyoming. We produce the products that they rely on every single day, whether it's coal to provide for energy, flip the switch and the light comes on, whether it's your trona resource to provide the glass you look out so you can look out upon my old house outside of the building that we're in right now, which is no longer there. It's a parking lot. But
we're very grateful. I'm sorry about your house, but there was nowhere to park before that was built.
Well, I parked there in my driveway.
House? Oh my God.
But again, we haven't talked about our bentonite industry.
Sure,
we're the nation's leading producer in bentonite, miracle mud, which is used in everything from your cosmetics to a fertilizer, clarifying agent for your beers and your wines, the clumping component in your cat litter, which we're the cat litter capital of the world.
Nice.
If you want to support your Wyoming bentonite industry, you buy cats.
Nice.
So that's a plug for the bentonite industry. But my point is that we use these products every single day. Americans need them. The world needs them. And so we're going to keep developing them, one way or the other. There'll be ups and downs. There always have been, but the industry's resilient and we're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, so well said. We're here for the long run to support you in the industry. So for our last question, we always take a different approach or a different focus. So obviously, you're a Wyoming native. We can see the parking lot that used to be your house from my very window here in my office. But you've traveled the state industry and you're always doing so. I see you on the I-80. Somehow, I always end up at the same gas stations of you.
We do, yeah.
It's weird. But on the way to minerals often. But across the state, you've seen so much. What's your favorite place to visit in Wyoming?
That's a great question. And in my, in my past life, when I worked a little bit more in the political arena, I think I've done 6 statewide political campaigns. Wow. I've been to every single corner of this state. And my travels today basically take me I get to go to Casper, I get to go to Gillette, I get to go to Rock Springs. And all those communities are great. They all have different characteristics and they all have their own personalities. But, living in Cheyenne, and I've been in Cheyenne for about 20 years now. That's where my roots are put down, probably permanently. But I always like coming back to Laramie because, this is where I grew up. And, whenever I have a meeting over here or an event that I have to go to, or if I'm coming to a Cowboy game, I always take a little drive around the town, see where, they're at my family house, which is no longer there. But I had a little house where my dad, when we first got back to Laramie, I go and see that and I drive by my old friend's house, and there aren't a lot of my old haunts back in Laramie that there were. Shoot, I've been gone for 30 years, but I always stop by Bud's Bar and have a beer. I think Laramie's probably my favorite community of the state of Wyoming right now.
It's an incredible community.
Yeah, it'll always be home to me.
Oh, great. Well, Travis, thank you so much for all you do for the state, for our mining industry, for us here at the School of Energy Resources, and thank you for doing the podcast.
Absolutely. Honored to do it. Have me back sometime.
Oh, I will.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.